Today, we are speaking with Josh Tejes, a bankruptcy attorney in Florida, who shares how he has used Cogent to automate it and accelerate his law practice.
But it gives me more peace of mind. The way I look at it is if I can set automation to do that bit of work, even if it takes me a little time now, is done forever after that. Now suddenly communication is happening and people aren't having to do it.
You have seen the intro. Now let's get into the details of how Josh has used Cogent to automate his law
Yeah,
practice.
so my name is Josh Tejes. I'm a firm is Tejes Law. I've practiced since, so I think that's 15 years. And I do primarily bankruptcy, debt defense, things like that, 7s and 13s, no 11s.
No, okay. And you're in Florida, correct?
Yes, yeah, in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah, we're all jealous of your weather.
Right.
A couple questions. So not specific to this software that we're going to talk about, but what kind of drove you to look for a solution like this? Like what really motivated you to find like a CRM or automation or any of that stuff?
So I used to use Clio, and their database was very difficult to automate. So I was already interested in automating things.
Okay.
But it was very difficult to. You could use Zapier to do some things, but it was very very difficult to have triggers that automated something else and kind of made a workflow as opposed to just doing one thing. It was the premise behind that whole system was people are inputting data and setting tasks and stuff like that, but the people are doing it, not computers doing it.
Yeah. Okay. So for those who don't know what Zapier is and don't really understand what automation is, maybe you can expand on that. So what I heard you say was your challenge with Clio was that it was designed for mostly human interaction, right? Not really running on its own based on what you said it as a trigger, which is the same term we use, which means that something happens and then the system does a bunch of things on its own, correct?
Right.
And so go ahead.
So yeah, so what Zapier does and what Cogent does is you can use if-then logic. So you have a trigger that says, if this thing happens, then I want something else to happen. And you can string that together to make a whole line of things happen with one trigger or multiple triggers. And that Zapier is created to connect two different systems together. So one computer program will talk to another computer program, and it can connect them together. But Cogent takes that a step further, where it has its own triggers that can then link things. And I've never seen any other system that does that.
Yeah, and so explain how that. Well, first of all, why is that important to you?
It's important because at some point it's too expensive to pay people, well, to pay employees well. You can't do that and get all the work done, especially when you're doing bankruptcy or debt defense, where it's you have a lot of cases that pay you $1,000, $500, $2,000, $3,000, but no cases are paying $40,000 or $50,000. So I needed a computer. At some point I can't call the clients back or send the text and send the emails. It just takes too long to type them. But if I can have a computer that says, okay, this event happened, now it sends this text to the client, we filed your case, or here's the day that you go to court, and here's the time in the Zoom links. Now suddenly communication is happening and people aren't having to do it.
So give me a hands-on simplistic example, maybe not your most complicated, because we'll get into that later, but like a very basic example of how this helped you and how this might help another law firm.
What do you mean?
Like a process example. So like maybe the first thing you automated when it came to using the system, for example, or the first three things, you're like, I really got to get this hands off. Like, do you have in your mind, do you have examples of that?
So the first thing I did when I got it is I got all the clients in, and I was working on the sales pipeline.
Okay.
So we completed consult. I do a consult, then I switch the opportunity in Cogent to say, okay, we made an offer. Now I'll send it to them. So then I made the system say, send it out a text to the client and an email saying, thank you so much for doing the consult. If you had any other questions, follow up with us. And then it waits for so many days and keeps following up with the client to try to get the client to call back and stay in front of the client rather than them calling the next firm and forgetting about us.
Yeah. And to emphasize the importance of that automated texting and emailing and stuff like that. We had an instance, and it's a federal thing where they required this A2P, which means we registered the texting number to the business because it's to stop spamming or whatever. But you had told me that during that time period where we were down and waiting for the registration process to occur, you noticed a drop in business. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so I don't know what the percentage was, but during that time, then the texts weren't going out. So emails were still going out, but texts weren't going out. And I saw my revenue drop by several $1,000s for that whole month. Probably a couple thousand a week during that month or so. And then it started picking back up once the texts start going out again, because clients like getting texts. They like to get a text that says, we enjoyed the consult, follow up with us, and they prefer that over email every day.
Well, and in bankruptcy in particular, in my experience, the feedback I've received from both attorneys, clients, but also the attorneys is that, it's one thing to get a text when you're at work or at home about your bankruptcy case. It's another to get a call. Right. Like I could be in the middle of a conference room with a bunch of people and get a text that says, hey, do you have your W-2 or whatever? Right. And I could easily text back and say, yeah, I'm in a meeting. I'll send it to you tonight. Right. Versus the old days, ring, 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 answer your phone. That's not a good time. I'm in the middle of a meeting, or, whatever the scenario plays out to be. Or, you're having a barbecue with your friends. You don't want to talk about your bankruptcy at your barbecue with your friends. It just gives you a little more privacy. And it gives you also the ability to respond when you want to respond.
Right.
And I think well, in general now it's kind of accepted to use texting for almost everything, but for things that are private in nature, criminal cases, bankruptcies, anything that you just don't want everybody to know, texting is a far more acceptable form of communication. Have you received any feedback like that? Do you have any comments?
Clients love it. So, theoretically, email would be private as well. But my personal email, I've got like 2,000 emails I can look at. And people do the same thing with law firms too. But a text from their lawyer, that they'll respond to right away. So they're seeing it faster. That's the idea. And they love it. They would prefer to text over even talking most of the time.
Yeah, and it's funny though. I myself as a consumer, I have a dental appointment, right? And they'll email you. Well, they used to call. They still do the calling thing,
right?
But I never answer phone calls. I rarely answer phone calls unless I know who it is, and I'm expecting the call. But if they send me a text and say you're going to make your appointment tomorrow, I'll be like, yes. Or, oh crap, I forgot. I have an appointment with my attorney tomorrow. I can't meet with you. Whatever the scenario is. You get far more response. You even see it now when you go to restaurants, right? Hey, what's the wait list?
Right.
Oh, it's about 30 minutes. Don't worry, we'll text you. Well, when I get that response from a restaurant, I'm like, okay, well, we're going to walk a block and go to see our second choice restaurant. And typically by the halfway there, they've already texted me and said, okay, your table's open, right? So it just creates this really fluid environment. Now, the other side of that is if you don't want to be texted by somebody, I'll give you a great example is political parties these days text me unsolicited, and they're allowed to do that apparently, and ask you for donations. I don't want that, right? So you can just type in stop and that kind of automatically opts you out.
Right.
So that's a nice thing. Now, back to the automation stuff. So I will say for anybody that watches, listens, or sees this or whatever, that you are in the top 10% as far as attorneys I work with in terms of your ability to understand and automate and do things. What I was hoping to share in this conversation that people can gain knowledge from is you specifically were talking about bankruptcy, and there's a lot of back and forth between the courts and yourself, right? And so you've done some really genius things with email parsing, which is a feature available in Zapier, and then connecting that to Cogent to then also do some automated follow-ups. Let's talk about, eating the elephant one bite at a time. So what was some of the first things you wanted to automate via email that happened, or did you just do it all at once? Like, how did that flow for you?
Yeah, so it started, I talked to a friend who did it, and they did it all through Zapier. And then he told me how he didn't go through step by step, but he kind of told me the big picture is what he did. I started and I was thinking, well, it would be nice when these events come, especially in federal court. It happens in state court as well, but it's not as uniform. In federal court, by district, it's exactly uniform all the time. And what we do, we file something in bankruptcy, we'll get an email. And we can have two settings as an attorney. We can have it where we're getting a summary of everything that happened in all of our cases. So one email with 50 cases or whatever. Or we can have it set so every time anything happens, we instantly get an email. And that was the part that I didn't get for about 2 years. I was like, this is impossible. I don't know how he did it. Is that if you want to automate it, you have to switch it so you're getting an email every single time. because getting one email for 50 cases, the law, my mind hurts trying to think through the logic of how to figure all that out.
Yeah,
How the computer to parse that out.
Probably not possible without the modern version of AI, and even then, still probably not consistent.
Yeah, I don't know how you would get that consistent. So, but once you have it once you have it where you're getting it by email, then the emails come in, and the courts they have their own automation, and so they're using automation to create the emails. So then you can use the logic off of that to figure out what the event is, what happened, which case it was, what happened, and then the docket texts, especially in federal court, are detailed enough. You can grab information like, when is the 341 meeting, or what, what's the Zoom ID or the Zoom password, and then you can grab that and parse that out, and then I get it into Cogent, and then it sends out emails.
So just for those that are viewing, this is something we do for our clients, is we help them do the parsing process. You've taken it. Let me just say this. For our clients, we take it to level 2, and you take it to level 200. Like like in terms of the automations I've seen that you've done. And so for every little thing that happens when the court sends you an email, you're pulling that out using a parsing process. There's a bunch of programs out there, but Zapier is probably the most common. So use Zapier.
Yeah.
It sends an email that probably goes to you and then copies the Zapier, which is nothing more than an automation tool. Mm-hmm. Zapier is smart enough to look through, and you can mark, okay, if it says this, do this, right? And you put text pieces into fields.
But I'm not using that parser. So I had already created the whole thing, and then I realized I had a whole separate email parser. That probably would have been easier had I figured that out. And as I was looking, I was like, this is kind of what I did. So I went through, and they have I forget what they call it, but where you can take data. So the data in this field, and then look for this, and then get rid of the stuff before, get rid of the stuff after. So it's doing it manually, essentially.
You did it a much more complicated way.
Yeah. So the parser would probably be a whole lot easier.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the goals of this conversation is to make people aware of this, but also for you and I to work together to kind of not only possibly revamp and make more efficient what you're currently doing, but also, in essence, create a blueprint that other attorneys can follow potentially if they're open to it.
Right.
Surprisingly, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, especially some of the old school attorneys is like, no, we do it this way. We're not going to do it any other way.
Right.
But what you've done and what you've done with the software that you have is frankly impressive. Mm-hmm. I mean, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. Why did you invest all that time, effort, and energy to do that?
Well, I had a friend that did it, and he was saying, Josh, it's amazing. As I think about it, I think of all the time I spend out sending an email. Hey, we filed your amended plan. Here's a copy. Or we filed your bankruptcy. Here's the case number. Or you got to go to court this day. Or here's the information for the 341 meeting. Even though we can do that, we've done it 1,000 times. We can do it easily. It still takes time to type out the email. Even if you have a template on your email to pull it up, and you're just filling it in. That still takes time. Well, if a computer does it, it happens instantly. So he started saying that he did it. It's amazing, and I could see that would be amazing. I just couldn't figure it out. But once I did it, it's like the business starts driving itself. So the triggers end up being the emails you got. And as attorneys, our whole world is run by emails because that's how we know what's happening in court. But if you can make those notifications that we get become the notifications or the triggers that make things happen, sending tasks to us, letting know something happened in the case, or sending notifications to the client. Hey, this happened. You're going to get a copy in the mail. Clients love that. I've gotten better reviews since I started doing this because the clients are getting anything big that happens in the case. They're knowing almost before I do because it's happening instantly to them, and I'm not looking at. I'm doing something else. I'm not looking at that email coming in. So I'm getting emails saying, "Hey, why did the trustee object to this?" The trustee objected. And,
I didn't know they did. The computer told me.
Yeah, maybe I need to put in a one day lag on that email to them. Things like that.
I'm willing to bet that you and I could create an automation that if it has the word objection in it or whatever, we can flag that and let you or your staff know.
Yeah, so some of that, it's more like give me a task and don't tell the client yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tell me, don't tell the client. Right. Exactly. But what you said about the good reviews is very valid because for a long time, so I started my career as an IT guy and I got into marketing like 12 years ago, and oddly enough, ended up working mostly with attorneys.
Right.
And one of the things I discovered in the legal space is one of the biggest complaints that I've heard, but also seen on like Google reviews and stuff is he never returns my calls.
Right.
They're too slow to respond, blah, 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 blah. Everything is about communication. And that's really true of any business, even mine. Like that's the biggest complaint we get sometimes is if we're not communicating enough about what's happening, when it's happening, stuff like that. So it's a challenge for every business.
Right.
But in the legal field, it's so document driven. It's so paperwork driven, and it's so trigger or action driven that it's almost impossible for a human to track all that stuff consistently, right? So there's going to be holes. There's going to be problems. And then let's even assume that Susie's secretary's like Superman. I don't know if you ever watched the TV series Suits.
Yeah, it's 1 or 2 episodes.
The redheaded girl, I can't remember her name, but she's like Superwoman. It's like she's on it like all the time. Like her attorney's like, hey, I've got it's my ex-wife's birthday tomorrow or my kid's birthday, and she's like, I already got the present, I already sent it. She's like, he's like, you're awesome, right? So this is the scenario we're talking about. It's like instead of a human, though, it's a computing system which doesn't fail unless we program it incorrectly,
right?
And if we program it incorrectly and we find the fault, we can fix it, and it won't happen again.
And then the cool thing is you can program it so if that step fails, it sends you an email saying, hey, this didn't go through, and then you can go and check and figure out why it didn't. And then
that's a whole nother level, actually, Josh. Having your own audit trail for when the system itself fails is a different level of thinking. But you get there because you're initially like, okay, I program it, it's all perfect.
Yeah. But
there's exceptions we don't always think about.
Right.
The other thing that I like about what you've done is, it's not necessarily a human replacement, it's a human augmentation. So you still have staff members who got to, mail stuff out, file paperwork, etc. But now if whoever is on the team is doing these things and traditionally would be doing the communicating via email or text or whatever, they have a sick day, they have a baby, they have a birthday, they go on vacation, whatever. There's some level of continuity still there. It may not be the same level as when the human's involved, but it keeps some level of consistency that really helps your firm or any firm look more professional, more organized, and as you said before, it gives you better reviews online. And my belief is it's only going to be more and more so in the future. And that if firms aren't doing what you're doing now, they're going to lose.
Oh yeah. Well, it makes my assistants more efficient. So one assistant could do more work or do harder work that I don't have to pay someone a little bit of money to put something on the calendar. So one of the most frustrating mistakes as an attorney is when you have a calendar, you calendar it fine, but you put it on the wrong day. So you're off by a day, so you missed the hearing, or you're showing up in court a day early. And that happened to one of our kids. So it was a meeting of creditors. We put it on the wrong day. We get a call from the trustee. Why aren't you here? So we jump in. So through this system, I made it so that the system, it can parse out the date and time of the meeting, but it can put it on the calendar. And then so rather than my assistant putting it on the calendar, it puts it on her calendar, and so it gives her a task saying, review this, make sure the computer didn't mess up. You just switch it to whatever attorney's calendar it needs to be. So suddenly what took her a minute now takes her 2 seconds. And then that minute can be sent to some other task. And then if you're watching the events come in, you as the attorney, we can tell the computer, well, if this happens, then tell the assistant to mail out a copy to the client, or to file a notice of certificate of service or something like that. It's amazing.
Yeah, but let's be fair. To get to that point, it takes a lot of upfront work and expense.
Took a month or so. Yeah.
Yeah. If you value your time at whatever dollar per hour that may be, you look at the number of hours you put into that. It's not a small amount of money to do that. However, so I'm gonna beat my chest here a little bit and say we do this for a lot of our clients, not to the level you've done this for yourself. But however, all the time you put in is an investment for the future. It's kind of like, they say sowing the seed, so to speak. So you put the seed in the ground and it grows into a big old tree or whatever, and produces fruit later. Same concept. Do you have any idea how many hours this might have saved you? Never mind the customer satisfaction and all that stuff, just man hours. What do you think that saved you?
I don't even know, but it gives me more peace of mind, because I know that if I review, that was the other thing that happened to me. This is one reason I wanted to do it, is I was going through and I got a notice from the court, said it did a notice of hearing, and I just missed it. I was going through and I didn't do the notice of hearing, so they canceled the hearing. And I had to go and I got it fixed. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if the computer had just set me a task saying do this thing, rather than me looking? This is when I had a summary and I had 50 cases and I just missed that one entry.
Right.
And so that gives me more peace of mind. The way I look at it is if I can set automation to do that bit of work, even if it takes me a little time now, is done forever after that. And all I have to do is automate or watch to make sure it's not failing. And I think all of your clients should hire you to do that, because the difficult part is connecting the two systems. So once you have it connected, Cogent is easy enough to use that any of your attorneys can should be able to add the little snippets. Because you're saying, I take it from level 10 to 2000. Well, all I'm doing is I'm watching the tags that come in. Like, wouldn't it be nice if the system sent an email saying this? You do it out and it's done. And that's really easy to do. Once you connect the two systems, it's very easy to add the rest.
Yeah. Well, it's easy for you. Not everybody is computer literate as you are, to be fair. And that's one of the reasons I have you on, because you understand the attorney side more than I do, and I presumably understand the technology side more than you do.
For sure, right?
I don't know about for sure, but I definitely have a more tenure, so to speak,
right,
in that space. I think you're a brilliant guy. You've done amazing things with the software, and the whole reason I wanted to have this call and record it and share it with people is because I was super impressed with what you've done.
Well, thank you.
When I went and looked at all the workflows you've built and all this stuff, could it be done in a more simplistic way? Maybe. And that's that's the art form in the automation space, is that I find that not just attorneys, but a lot of business folks overthink things and overdo things.
Right.
So I like to apply the 80-20 rule. So let's get 80% of the stuff figured out with only 20% of the work.
Right.
And then let's plug the holes in the bucket later.
Right.
And the reason that I approach it that way is many years of experience with computers and people and stuff, is that if you try to swallow the whole
can't do it
thing at once, you'll just give up. You'll get pissed. You'll get upset. Mistakes will happen. Right. So you want to put out the big fires first and then hit the little fires later. And it's one of those things that's, because you've been on the system for a while. It's one of those things where you didn't start out with all this stuff right away. You did this thing, like, okay, what if I did this? And then what if I did this? And then what if I did this? And so that's one of the things I like to leave open to our clients, which you are one, is come to us and say, hey, I've got this thing that I'd like to fix. Can we fix it? And sometimes we can't fix it with the software we provide, but I have resources or assets I have access to. I can say, well, if you purchase this software or subscribe to the software, we can connect these two things and then make that happen.
Yeah. So a good example of that, this is pretty early on. My old system used to be able to say a client makes a payment and it can show how much they still owed. So I think, wouldn't it be nice if I could do that? So we use QuickBooks Online, and you can link those two, and so then it sends the data over, and then so I did it. So I can say, okay, here's the client's total, here's what they owe, or here's the total amount they're going to pay, here's what they owe, and does the math and tells you how much they pay. So I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice if the amount they owe goes to zero, it just moved the stage, so you can make it so an accounting entry makes the questionnaire go out to the client, an email go out to the client. So if my assistant misses it, the thing still goes out, and I don't have an angry client. Why in the world did you miss me? It's been 2 months.
Right.
It's not happening anymore. It's great.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I think I don't know. I'm good with where the conversation is right now to end it at the moment. I'm sure we'll have more in the future. I think one of the things a couple things. I am absolutely determined that a business will fail in the future without automation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm absolutely determined that a business will fail in the future without some form of AI, which is kind of a new thing for a lot of people. And we're investing a lot of time and energy and understanding and how to use that. I think I might have demoed you some of that stuff. I mean, for the ability, it's so crazy now that, and I'm sure there's bigger companies than ours that you can literally call a phone line, think you're talking to a human and you're not, and it's
crazy.
Handling all the conversations and setting appointments and stuff. That's coming, right? So as we move forward, it's super important for anybody watching this or hearing this to understand that if you're not even taking the most basic steps to automate, you're going to be way behind the power curve in the future. And oddly enough, I think larger firms are the worst off.
Right.
because they cannot pivot. It's the same reason that entrepreneurs can outmaneuver big companies, is because they can make changes and decisions faster than, a Walmart can, for example. And it's the same reason large companies acquire small companies, because they want their intellectual property, their knowledge, their people, whatever. So the point of me saying this is, if you're listening to this and you're not doing workflows and automations and software and looking, at least thinking about it and looking at AI and stuff like that, you will be left in the dust. It's very simple, because I don't know how many, I was trying to get to the point with you. I was saying, how many man hours have you saved?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact of the matter is, it could be, 20 minutes a day, whatever your hourly bill rate is, times 365 days a year or whatever.
Right.
And never mind your staff, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that means you're a lean operation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If we go to an old school law firm, maybe the individual is, 70, 80 years old, and they've done everything by paper. And they're like, I've done it this way my whole life, I'm never going to change. That's fine, but you're going to get left behind, because now Josh can charge a third of what you charge if he wants to. Doesn't have to, but he could, and still make decent margins on his cases, because there's less human involvement, there's less time involvement, there's less error, there's more consistency. It's just impossible to beat somebody who has that advantage. It's almost like, I don't know if you remember the transition from Yellow Pages advertising to internet advertising. The people that held on to the Yellow Pages, like, I've got the back page of the Yellow Pages, I'm never going to let that go. Well, they got smoked. They got smoked by Google and everybody else. So this is where we're at with automation and AI. And so if you're not going that direction, my opinion, mine only, is that you'll be left in the dust.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, my assistants spend less time on the phone now, for sure. And I've spent less time on the phone with clients, because when you have a ton of clients, you can't call them all back. If you get 40 calls and each call is going to take you 2 or 3 minutes, that's not very long, but there's so many calls, you can't do it. And of course you can train staff, but if you can have it so the computer's just telling them what they need, they're texting it, they're not calling. And that takes a second to go back that an assistant can do. And you don't have to do it. So that has saved me a lot of time, and the clients are happier. So I agree. I think if companies don't automate, especially law firms don't automate, they will get left in the dust. Kind of like the yellow books, the Yellow Pages.
The yellow, some places, I guess they call them yellow books. I know they broke that up for a little bit, but yeah. So I think that, I mean, and this is why I really wanted to have this conversation, because you understand law, I don't. You understand the process of running a law firm, I don't necessarily. I do, sort of, just based on my 10 plus years of dealing with, law firms. Most of that, actually, up until the last 3 years, was just generating leads for them.
Right.
And then realizing, okay, I'm generating leads for them, but when it gets to their doorstep, I don't know what happens, right? And so, as you had said early on, one of the primary purposes of Cogent was to do PNC, potential new client follow-up, and that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And what you've done is taken it a step further and said, okay, now we have a case. How can I make it also follow up with the casework and communicate with clients? So it's really a automation and communication solution.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's the only one out there. There's a billion different platforms out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that our objective, our goal is to do what you've done, but help our clients who are less tech savvy. I mean, you are the exception to the rule. Who are less tech savvy, help them implement the ideas that you've already implemented yourself. Mm-hmm. In terms of, hey, if this, what if this happened? What if we got a notification from QuickBooks, and then all of a sudden it updated the stuff and this, and then this happened, like that kind of thinking is where we want to be, and where we want to bring ideas to our clients. And it frankly, because I don't run a law firm, your input and your ideas and your feedback helps me serve the legal community better. And so this conversation is going to help a lot of people, I think, really open their eyes.
It makes a big difference.
And
I've only done it for a couple of months. I haven't had it running for very long. Difference.
Well, I think that it's interesting that you said early on that you're like, oh, well, when we had the A2P thing, we had to register your phone number and the texting stopped and my revenue dropped.
Yeah, it was horrible.
It was horrible. Yeah. It's a huge accolade to the process.
Right.
I've had dealings with larger law firms where that's kind of how they would test advertising. They would literally run Google pay-per-click this month for like 3 months, right? And then 1 month shut it off and say, let's look at the finances and see if it's different. Like they had no way to measure that stuff. Right. One of the things we haven't discussed that the system can do is measure ROI by lead source, which means if I spend $1,000 on Google, how much money do I get back? And the way it does that, as you're well aware, is it can track that what you spent and who the contacts who were generated from what you spent, and then what the result of that spend was.
Right.
And so that was always my primary goal because I've been in the advertising space for so long. But what I really, because of my way back in the days IT background, the automation stuff that you're doing is actually far more fascinating to me, because you could have the same number of inquiries or leads from your website every single month. But if you automate the follow-up process for the potential new client and you automate the case process for that, your revenues and your net profits will go up without changing the amount of advertising you're spending.
Right, exactly. And you can change it. Well, so the two things that attracted me to Cogent in the very beginning is, first, the ability to track a case beyond the sale. Most programs, you have a program for the sale and you have a program for managing the case, but it's not one thing all the way through. So that's and then the other thing was the return on investment for a lead source. That was the other thing that I had a spreadsheet that I would spend hours trying to figure out, and I could figure it out, but it took a lot of time. That's baked into Cogent. I mean, it's right there, and all you have to do is fill in the right fields, and then you said automation to do that, so it's doing it as it goes, and then you're just running your business, and then you can pull up a report. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells you from this lead source, you did so many consults, you had so many retainers, and here's your ad, and here's what we think you would have made from that, which is great.
It's great. Yeah, it's not 1,000% accurate, but it's like 80% there, and it's better than what you can get from almost any other place. And if you connect it to QuickBooks like you did, you probably even have a down to the penny accurate number.
Well, I haven't done that. It's not spending that data. That's a good idea.
That's probably coming next year, right?
Yeah, I gotta think
Josh,
about that.
Josh 2.0.
I think about it. That's a good idea.
Well, you probably could, but I mean, at some point, what's the ROI on getting down to the pennies? Really, what we want to do is make sure that we're getting as many of our potential new clients to sign as we can, and that we're following up and servicing them as best we can. If you have one place to do that, that's fantastic. And when we add this AI component that I showed you, and we add, and we intertwine that with automation, it's going to be crazy. This next year is going to be insane. In terms of technology, it's going to be insane. Anyway, thank you for your time, Josh. We'll talk again, okay?
That concludes our interview with Josh Tejes. We look forward to sharing more client success stories and ideas in the near future. If your business would benefit from automation and AI, come visit us at cogentcrm.com.